Hello, Richard Powski here with Tommy Nation Politics, and I want to talk about something tonight, something that's really getting me fired up. Okay, there are these false rumors going around that the South Carolina primary and the Super Tuesday race, that the exit polling for these races was... It didn't match the actual results. And apparently, what's part of the rumor is that these discrepancies are so big that they are at United Nations intervention levels, meaning that this signifies that voter fraud took place. And when exit polling is inconsistent with the actual results, at this level, the UN steps in and intervenes. But it's a lie. It's a complete rumor. And it's been verified that these rumors were started by one user on Twitter who just posted this fake story. And it was retweeted thousands of times. And, it ended up on Facebook. And now it's accepted as fact. If you bring up something about Bernie losing, you're sure to get a couple dozen replies with people saying, well, the election was stolen from Bernie by the DNC, and it will be liked tons of times. A lot. This can be easily disproven by factcheck.org and by the fact that CNN has the actual exit polling numbers on their website. So these two links completely debunks the story. So, very few people will accept that it didn't happen, even if you show them the proof. But the very few that even do accept, okay, yeah, it's a conspiracy theory, okay, it's not true, they'll bring up something else. They'll bring up that the election was rigged against Bernie because Barack Obama made those two phone calls, which led to Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg dropping out. But what they don't realize is that this kind of thing is called political strategy. You see, a lot of times when I hear these things from the Bernie brothers, which I'm one of them. Before we go any further, I'm a millennial Bernie brother, okay? And when I see these things brought up, I can't help but think, did they just get into politics in 2020 or within the last 4 years? Did they just get into politics in 2016? Because what Barack Obama did what the DNC asked Barack Obama to do when he asked Amy and Pete to drop out and mobilize behind Joe Biden so that their supporters, their votes would go to Joe Biden. There's a thing for that. It has a name. It's called political strategizing. You see, there are entire college degrees dedicated to this. There are entire careers dedicated to this. In fact, if two phone calls can be made, sync an entire campaign just with two people dropping out. If that's possible, number one, I would argue that the Bernie Sanders campaign was not as strong as we thought it was. Okay, that probably was an illusion. If two phone calls, if it was always two phone calls away from syncing, at some point we have to acknowledge how strong was his campaign. Okay? And if you think that what happened there, the DNC asking them to drop out and incentivizing them to drop out, if you think that's rigging an election, then I would urge you to look up Lee Atwater, okay? Because he was a Republican strategist who is known to this day for his questionable ethics and his strategies when it came to winning elections. And a lot of people say he was the reason why George H.W. Bush won in 1988. The strategies he came up with. And he had some nasty strategies, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but All I can say is if you think making 2 phone calls and, telling 2 major candidates, hey, if we mobilize behind this guy, you'll get a cabinet position. If you think that is cheating or rigging, look up Lee Atwater. Trust me, this is a common thing. It's called political strategizing. And they were completely in their right to do that. And you know what? If Bernie Sanders used some better political strategies, he might have won. We might be looking at Bernie Sanders at the debates last night instead of Joe Biden. But instead, he every chance he got to disqualify his opponents by saying they are not qualified to face Trump head on, he complimented them. He didn't follow the rules of political strategy. See, Joe Biden, he ran for president 3 times. Finally, he got it right in 2020. And you know how he finally got it right in 2020? Because he cut the throat of everyone in his way. He was the opposite of humble. And that's why he's the nominee. At the end of the day, the loss of Bernie Sanders has to be attributed to one thing, and that is that his base did not show up at the polls. I want to say something. At the beginning of the race, at the beginning of the primaries, I was in a rough point in my life. I'm 27 years old, and things had never been that bad. I had nothing to my name. I didn't even have a phone. But I love Bernie Sanders so much, and I had so much hope for his campaign that, every day I was able to borrow a friend's phone for a couple minutes, and for all of that time, I was checking updates on the race. And I remember on the night Nevada happened, like I said, I was in the worst spot of my life, but I felt so much hope and love in my heart because I didn't see just hope for me. I saw hope for so many disenfranchised people in this country. That night where I was sleeping in a dugout and I saw how much Bernie won Nevada by. And I was just floored. I was amazed, and I felt so much hope in that time of misery. So all that to say, I know a lot, whenever I bring up the fact that Bernie lost for one reason only, not one reason only, but a big reason why he lost that no one wants to take accountability for, is that his base just did not show up. People didn't show up. The numbers were worse than 2016. In 2016, Bernie gave Hillary a run for her money. It wasn't even close this time because for whatever reason, the people didn't show up to vote. At the end of the day, that's what we have to contribute this loss to. You can speculate all you want about many different things. You can speculate about what the DNC would have done if Bernie Sanders voters did turn out in higher numbers. You can speculate as to how the convention would have gone. Would they have brought up some system like superdelegates? Would there have been a contested convention? Go ahead. You can quarterback this all you want. But at the end of the day, it'll come to Bernie's base did not show up on Super Tuesday. And therefore, the momentum that he had from Nevada shifted to Joe Biden. Okay? Because the media was never going to give Bernie a fair shot. And I don't want to hear that as an excuse as to why he lost. You know who else got bad media attention? Donald Trump. And he got to the White House. Okay? Bernie knew what deck he was playing with. His supporters knew what deck he was playing with. Okay? Even when he was the front runner, the media wouldn't acknowledge it. So we all better believe that on Super Tuesday, when he had a very poor showing, of course, they were looking at Joe Biden as the front runner because now they have a reason to. On March 3rd, on Super Tuesday, baby boomers showed up in record-breaking numbers. and they voted for Joe Biden. And the votes cast for Bernie Sanders paled in comparison. And all of this was regardless of the record-breaking numbers of individual campaign contributions to Bernie Sanders. Okay? The low voter turnout was regardless of the tens of thousands of individuals who showed up to his rallies. I remember I was at a rally in Kentucky in the year 2017, not an election year, and it was packed. There were people outside who couldn't get in. I was one of those people who got in. I drove hours to get there. It's no question that between Bernie and Biden, Bernie was the more popular one, especially among young people, Americans age 18 to 39. So where were they on Super Tuesday? Well, the answer is that they were not voting. They were at home watching Netflix, eating their Grubhub takeout, calling Trump a Cheeto pussy grabber, calling him that on Twitter, and then patting themselves on the back for being so virtuous and calling out that mean, nasty orange man for who he was. They were taking pictures of their Grubhub African fusion takeout and posting them on Instagram, bragging about how cultured their food choices are. Putting the caption, "African fusion is always a favorite of mine. #foods of the world." It's a proven fact that Americans age 18 to 39 don't like to vote, don't want to vote, do not vote, and don't understand how important it is to vote. This is a fundamental problem we have as a generation. The millennial and Gen Z generation are very active in terms of protesting, of hashtag activism, and speaking their minds. What they don't understand is that they might as well be completely silent if they don't show up to the polls and vote. While younger Americans were speaking their minds on Twitter or in the streets protesting, the baby boomers were dictating how the future of this country is going to be for the next 16 years. It's been established that the younger generations have a voting problem, but I think it's much bigger than that. Our generation has an accountability problem. Time and time again, when I point out that there were no exit poll discrepancies and that the DNC did not steal the election from Sanders, and that the only entity that is directly responsible for his loss are those who did not cast their votes for him. When I say that, the reaction is extreme denial, resistance, and worse, hostility. The way I see it, this lack of accountability is even more dangerous than our stubbornness when it comes to the importance of voting. Because if we don't acknowledge this problem, it will never be solved. There's a saying among people who are recovering from addictions, and it goes something like, we need to accept the things we cannot change and change the things we can. And if progressives don't understand the fact that the election was not stolen from Bernie, but even if it was, dwelling on it will solve nothing because we can't change it. But what us progressives can change is our level in participating in the voting process. So if Bernie Sanders supporters keep harping on what they think the DNC did for Bernie, if they keep harping on what they think was the DNC stealing the election from Bernie and deny that they as a whole have any responsibility for not having a higher turnout, the problem is just going to keep repeating itself. Progressive voters will keep having a low turnout, and they'll just keep blaming it on someone else, and the problem will never be solved. The solution to this problem is simple. Everyone who wants their candidate to win needs to vote for them. And if we practice that simple principle in this year's primaries, then it would have been Bernie Sanders on that debate stage facing Trump instead of Biden. Now, wouldn't we have loved that? That's all I got today, and Thanks for listening.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today?